All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's live webinar with Our Hometown. My name is Matt Larson. I'm the president and CEO of Our Hometown. And today's webinar is actually brought to you in partnership with the National Newspaper Association and Foundation. It's a great organization. We work with them a lot. We have done so over the years, but much more so over the last year. They're a great resource for newspapers. So happy to be associated with them. What I wanted to do today is discuss automating podcasting with audio articles. We're going to talk about podcasting in general, why, you should be looking into it as a local news publisher, if you aren't already. If you're here, though, it's probably something that you've, considered doing, but, looking at the obstacles to getting started has made it difficult. And so I think I'm going to present audio articles, the case for that as a solution to, a lot of those issues. So a little bit of background on Our Hometown, just so that you know where we're coming from with all this. We manage hundreds of newspaper websites and native apps across North America. We have a WordPress-based platform that we do the hosting on. It's been customized for news publishers, so it's completely turnkey WordPress. Right out of the gate. And we just, handle all the hosting and maintenance for the papers. We're a family business, like a lot of the customers that we work with, a lot of the, community newspaper publishers. And we were founded in upstate New York in 1997. So we've been doing this for a long time. Our number one priority has always been customer support. And so that really drives the technology because the platform is evolving. It's based on the WordPress CMS, so it's very easy to modify it. And the feature set that we have is based entirely on publisher feedback. And so, that brings us to today's feature, which is the sponsor of today's webinar, audio articles, which allows you to turn your newspaper website into a podcast completely automatically. And so at nna.org, if you check it out, we've got a video up in the top right corner here that I want to show you that just kind of tries to capture, the reason that we're interested in this technology and, getting into audio more.
The modern person is mobile-bound, multitasking, and always on the go. They don't have the time to sit down with a newspaper or even focus on a screen long enough to consume the local news. With over 60% of the United States listening to online audio every week, more people are tuning into podcasts as their preferred method of obtaining news and information. Many publishers have shied away from podcasting because of production costs. But what if creating a podcast for your newspaper could be completely automated? Introducing Audio Articles Podcast from Our Hometown. Now any publisher can have their website text converted to audio and fed to every major podcast app. Make your local news easy to access as a podcast playlist, which you can also embed on your website. Contact us at our-hometown.com/newspaperpodcast.
Okay, so that's what we're really talking about today, but I'm going to give you the whole background and the whole story behind, why we got into this, why are we focused on podcasting, and, how are we making this happen in a couple case studies. So in the next 30 to 40 minutes, we'll discuss why you should get into podcasting. We'll look at some of the numbers, including the current podcast audience in the U.S., advertising trends. I also want to consider the barriers to entry and the issues with production, why people aren't getting into this, because just to kind of identify those issues is helpful because we see the solution as simply automating the production of the audio content and feeding it into the podcast apps. So developing that technology, again, based on user feedback and publisher feedback. So right now, if you can locate the questions box, type your name, the paper you're with, and whether you have tried creating an audio podcast. Just give me a little bit more background on you all, just so I know what your experience is here and some of the issues that you may have faced. What is a podcast? Just to really boil it down, bring it down to the basics, it's really just an audio program that you can subscribe to on your smartphone. You don't need to think of a podcast necessarily as Some of the examples we have over here, Gary Vee or the Joe Rogan Experience, like the format that they present is just one example, that kind of talk show interview format. What we're talking about here is communicating with your audience through their smartphone, through audio. Because this is a way to reach people when they're on the go. Similar to talk radio, except that it's on demand. And a podcast is also just generally content that's presented as a playlist. And the most common apps where you see these playlists are Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. So, if that's what we're talking about, that's like, the essentials to make a podcast. There's a lot more, room to do something here. So we're going to talk about how we're automatically transforming text articles into audio and creating podcasts from that. The audio market continues to grow. So let's look at the opportunity here for our audience. As we saw in the video, 60% of the U.S. population listens to online audio each week. And despite the loss in commute times, we've seen steady growth in 2020. Between January and April 2020, there was a 28% increase in total listening on these platforms. And since then, let's see, there's a 51% increase from January to September 2020. This is the opportunity. It was already, I think at the beginning of 2020, 60% of the audience had listened to online audio. So, this continues to grow. The news genre has the highest number of impressions. And a lot of this data is available through Edison Research and the AdsWiz Podcast Trends Report. If anyone's interested in reading this, I'm happy to send along these resources. Okay, and thank you for the feedback here. We've got some folks from North Carolina. Okay, great. I appreciate that feedback. Okay, and then in terms of the advertiser perspective, podcasts now represent 19% of digital audio buys. Since COVID, 64% of advertisers are spending more or the same in podcasts. I found this stat especially interesting because, this is not something that we're generally seeing in areas of digital advertising. It's not going up or steady, it's going down. And I think the opportunity here is that Google and Facebook, their platforms don't have audio products that you can buy yet. You can't go into Facebook Ad Manager and just buy an audio product because their product is just not audio based. So that's an opportunity for us to kind of corner that, I think. 78% of respondents currently monetize their podcast content. So, they're just kind of talking to the podcast hosts. So, they are making money doing this manually, but there's a lot of time involved. A lot of these people, it's like their full-time job. 50% of these podcast hosts do it through sponsorship or host-read ads. And if you listen to podcasts at all, I'm sure you've heard these at the beginning of the podcast. The hosts will just give the sponsor, read off their copy, basically. And that's how half of them are kind of presenting the ads. So, they do it right at the beginning, and we can replicate that automatically with our platform. So I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. The publisher perspective, though, to consider, I talked about this earlier, audio is expensive to produce. It requires experience with audio recording and editing to be able to turn these around at all, but to turn them around with frequency, and consistency is not a simple thing. And it could take a long time to grow a new audience that is large enough to monetize. So for creating these podcasts, to get into them in the first place is, there's that hurdle, but you got to really sustain it to build the audience. And so from our perspective, the solution is that you've got to automate the majority of that content production so that, you can just kind of grow the audience, set it and forget it. You're already producing articles on the website. If we can turn them into audio, feed them into a podcast, then you've got episodes being produced, every day, and people are going to be more likely to tune in and see, the updates. This feature, audio articles, was released in January 2020 for the first time. Again, based largely on user feedback. We had this idea, kind of threw it out there to some publishers. Some were very interested, and they joined us in the beta testing, and we developed the feature. That's kind of just how we work as a company. And so what this does is it automatically converts every article published on the website into these mini podcasts. So let's take a look. Signals. This is just a series that they have on this day in history. A lot of people like to do this. And what happens when you have the audio articles feature enabled on our platform is you've got the player on every article of the website.
Audible story.
Let's just take a listen here. If I hit play, you're going to hear that host read ad, quote unquote. It's an audio ad that is just copy that's written into the dashboard on the back end of the website, and it usually matches the text message that they have here. And then it's going to read the article. It's actually going to skip the headline in this case, but you have the option to have it read the headline. But let's take a look at what is automatically produced by the computer.
Audible stories made possible by the Prescott Hearing Center. Get your free hearing test today. It was just 80 years ago today, March 17, 1941, when then President Roosevelt announced to the world that the newest construction of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., was completed. In reality, the idea had been a long one in waiting, and had actually been approved by Congress and established in 1937. However, the National Gallery of Art is now considered to be one of the greatest museums in the world, and one of the largest marble buildings. Now, the cool thing about this place, it's free to get into, no admissions compared to other museums around the world. Upon entering, you are greeted by some of the greatest works of the classics, going back to the medieval ages. If you plan on visiting, prepare for a long trip, as more than 70,000 prints, paintings, and other various documents and sculptures crowd these halls.
Okay, so that is just an example of one of the many different voices. There's dozens of voices you can choose from. That's the male voice. I think it's actually called Matthew. And then there's a female voice, different accents that you can choose from. But that's all automatically generated. As soon as the article is published on the website, this audio file is updated. So you could be changing the story, adding more details, and it will, as you save it on the website, it'll automatically update that file. So that's the foundation of everything that we're talking about today, the ability to create those audio articles and listen to them on the website. And as I mentioned, you can insert audio ads in the beginning of each audio article and, obviously sell that as a premium sponsorship. But then the automated podcasting, that is a recent innovation that allows us to turn those individual audio articles that, right now, as I just showed you, exist on the article level. So you listen to one story at a time. Now we're turning them into playlists, and it just makes so much sense. It's kind of like hindsight is 2020. Why didn't we do this from the beginning? Because it's like now your newspaper is a playlist. It's like literally turning the old form factor into the new. So we can now embed this playlist on any website and syndicate the episodes across podcast apps. Anyone that signs up for audio articles on our platform automatically has the ability to have the podcast. And we can monetize that with the sponsored content or, the audio ads. We got some examples on the next slide. I already showed you the one from Signals. I'll show you a few more. But we recently had this interview with the editor and publisher for their podcast, and you can watch it on our virtual conferences page on ourhometown.com. But we presented these two case studies. The first one was from Signals AZ, the executive editor, Guy Rodgenson. We interviewed him and talked about how he was the first one to adopt the audio article technology and monetize it with an audio ad. We also spoke with Kristen Weaver, who is the director of operations at WilsonCountyNews.com. This is a weekly newspaper in Texas, and she has monetized it by packaging the audio ads with Facebook Live. And she was actually the first one to automatically create a podcast from her newspaper. Let's take a look at some case studies here. If we go to our website, we've got a whole page for audio articles podcasts, and we've got the two case studies here. So again, with Wilson County News, they've got the player on the individual article pages, but then they've also got this playlist. So let's go over to Wilson County News and take a look at how this actually looks and fits into everything on the website. So again, just think like classic weekly newspaper. They've got the e-edition right up front. They've got some inserts, but then right underneath that, highly prioritized on the page, is the audio articles, audio editions. And so I can just hit play and listen to these episodes back to back. And as it works out, these episodes are very digestible and short. We're talking 30 seconds to maybe 6 minutes tops. That's a very long article. So people can come in here and just listen to one story at a time. It's not like they need to listen to the newspaper front to back. They can look at the titles and just kind of dip in. So I just think it's interesting because a lot of the podcasters out there are, for some reason going towards that very long format where it's like episodes are hours long. I think this makes more sense. And, this is how long the articles are anyway. So that's just how it works out. Now, the other thing that they are doing, like I said, they were the first ones to syndicate it to Apple Podcasts, Google, and several other apps. So I can come into Apple Podcasts and actually listen to the story. Now, this is going to be from a female voice, but it's also just completely automated, exactly as we saw with Signals. It's just that, this article exists on the Wilson County website, but it's also on all these third-party apps. So here it is on Apple.
Audio articles on Wilson County News made possible by Witt's Barbecue Steaks and Catering in La Vernia. Wilson County Appraisal District opens lobby with limitations. The Wilson County Appraisal District office has opened its lobby for property owners who want to talk with someone about their appraisals in person. Lobby hours are 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. However, no more than 2 customers will be allowed inside at the same time. 2 areas have been set up to maintain social distancing for customers who are asked to wear masks inside.
Okay, so that's, just a pretty typical example, about 30 seconds, and then that would automatically play one episode after another. Again, Wilson County is monetizing this, but I think, you could easily argue that this is, adding value to your paying subscribers. So, there's a lot of ways to monetize this. Now, the other thing, I pretty much showed you everything with Guy except for the homepage, but that's the same as Signals. Now, the other thing that Wilson County did was cross-promote this really well in print, and I just like to point this out. So they wrote a full article on this, talked about what is a podcast, some of the things that we're talking about in this session to introduce their audience, their print audience to this new medium. Because you never know, some of these people that are, still focused on the print and not reading you online, they may have already made the jump to podcasts. Some people, it's weird how technology gets adopted in this way. Similarly, most of our customers see the majority of their traffic, even from the older population, from mobile. It's kind of skipped over desktop. You just want to be cross-promoting this stuff whenever you can. This is the opportunity for everyone on this call. Even without using our hometown's CMS, we can get you this podcast. Literally just through the RSS feed, which is available on any CMS. If you can provide that to us, then this would be the workflow. Step 1, you would publish an article on your current website exactly as you do today. Step 2, that article would come to us through the RSS feed. We would create the article just like we do for our customers, through the audio articles tool on a demo site that we set up for you. And then we would basically syndicate from there to all the podcast apps through Buzzsprout. And so that for just $99 a month, we can do that for you virtually unlimited. It's technically 2 million characters that you get a month. But for any weekly newspaper, that's going to be more than enough bandwidth. So just shoot me an email. I'll put my contact info up at the end, and we'll also send a follow-up email with a recording of this to everyone on the call. But just get back to us. Go to our website and sign up. ourhometown.com/audio articles podcast, and we can set you up with an initial free trial just to try it out. The other thing that's new that I wanted to talk about today that I haven't on this session, because I've given this presentation a couple times now to different organizations, is the future of audio articles. The new audio player. This is something that we're really excited about because we're rebuilding the audio player from scratch. It's going to allow a lot more customization to the article player and the playlist generator. Just a little bit of background on that. We use a third party called Buzzsprout. I mentioned it very briefly earlier to create that playlist. And so we're going to basically rebuild it and do it all from scratch. It's going to allow us to have more control over the ads, the audio ads that appear at the beginning of each story, because right now that's a premium position. There can only be one advertiser in there at a time. We want to make it more share of voice. And then we're also going to integrate all this with our related stories recommendation engine and open up the door to customized playlists. So, depending on what article you're listening to, have different recommendations for the next article, depending on the content of the first story, depending on your listen history, so a little bit of personalization there. And long term, well, we're actually already implementing this stuff, but it's going to become central to everything that we do, using more machine learning and A/B testing to improve recommendations, both for text articles and for audio articles. So, as far as I can tell, the future is streaming audio, video content. You look at YouTube, everything on there auto plays. That's the direction that they're going with things. So we want to be able to do that too through the related stories feature, which is in beta testing now. It uses the named entities in the article context to identify the most related stories in the CMS or the most related audio episodes, and just automatically link the user to them at the bottom of the story. So again, we can apply that same technology to the audio articles because obviously we have the text of all these audio files. There's no transcription involved. So we can use the same technology that's going to be recommending text articles to recommend new articles. So, this is basically what it looks like now. At the bottom of every story, it's going to recommend other stories that mention the same players or the same teams of the sporting event. So that's a little bit of a tangent there, but it all ties in. These are just some of the things that we're working on in R&D. So that's pretty much my presentation. Automated podcasting. Again, I just think my point here is that we want to be getting into podcasting. The audience is there, and everyone is already stretched very thin. So if we can automate, the production as much as possible, that would be ideal. So let's get your questions in now. We had a couple in here. We had some feedback. I appreciate that. But let me know if you have any last minute questions, because we're going to wind it down in just a few minutes here. But while we're waiting, and I'll watch that questions area, we've got some upcoming events. So for any Our Hometown customers on the call, these are, of course, completely free. All of our Kevin Slimp events. You all know Kevin, the news guru. He's just a fantastic presenter. We have these with him every month. This is the current lineup, and we're just going to continue this throughout the rest of the year. But again, as an Our Hometown customer, you get free access to all of these webinars. And Kevin actually gives me a little bit of leeway. He allows me to invite some publishers that are interested in Our Hometown also and considering us. Even considering using us for just the audio articles podcast through the RSS feed. So anyone that thought that was an interesting concept, get in touch with me today. We'll get you set up with a prototype, a free trial, and then you will be a prospect for Our Hometown, and then you can come to our next session on May 6th on increasing your revenue for designing more effective ads. Also, just another event we have coming out at the Illinois Press Association. I'm going to be talking about how we're using automation to increase revenue and engagement. A big part of that is going to be the audio articles, but we're also going to talk about newsletter automation, social media marketing, how you can just kind of set that up and forget about it. You don't need to go through the labor of posting there. A lot of different things. Anyone in Illinois is welcome to join us for that on May 7th. And I think we've got a question. It's from Anonymous, but this is, I think, Amelia Harper. So will the paper have any control of the articles? For instance, if the automated system mispronounces words or links articles inappropriately. Right, okay, so two different things there. You're talking about just audio articles mispronouncing words, and that is what actually my engineer is working on right now. So this is kind of like a little bit behind the scenes. what's going on in the shop. He is creating the controller mechanism that's going to allow us to, adjust pronunciation on any word. So you could fix it locally just for your paper. The pronunciation of some person's name, which, could be different in a different paper. So it's not going to just change global settings for our system. You will have that control. The second thing, though, is links articles inappropriately. You're talking about the related stories function, which I just teased here today. This session was really not supposed to be about that, but I'm really excited. I can't help but talk about it. We're testing it in closed beta right now. We have a lot of great results coming from it. But the question is if it's a bad recommendation. Yeah, any part of that can be tweaked as well. So with us, you have direct contact with the engineers. So you could email an engineer and say, send us a screenshot and say, this article was recommended at the bottom, this doesn't work. And we would tweak the algorithm for you to fix that. So I don't think right now, we don't have a way to give you that option, but that's something that we could definitely build into the future. If there's a lot of people giving us feedback and we're just constantly customizing for them, we'll probably want to create the tools just on the back end for you to do that yourself. That's a great question, though. Okay, so any last question? We have an attendee. Amelia, you raised your hand, but you then asked your question over here, I think, so you should be good. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I had for today. So again, Matt Larson. I'm with Our Hometown, and we just in general provide web publishing solutions for local newspapers, but we're really focused on the audio podcast space right now. So just get in contact with me, shoot me an email, go to our website, go to contact us. There's tons of ways to get a hold of us, and we'd love to talk to you about what we can do for your newspaper.